So now we're gonna transition to the portion of the webinar that many attendees might find most valuable, which is hearing directly from someone with firsthand experience. So we're pleased to introduce Reeve Amber Link, who currently serves as the Reeve for Wheatland County, which is located east of Calgary. Reeve Link is a dynamic and respected leader with deep roots in rural governance and economic development. Now serving her 7th term as Reeve of Wheatland County, Amber has been a driving force behind major investments that are transforming Alberta's rural landscape, including de Havilland Canada's new headquarters and CGC's Wellbird plant. Amber also represents Rural Voices provincially and nationally as a district director with the rural municipalities of Alberta. Her leadership spans numerous boards and committees where she provides expertise in governance, risk management, and strategic planning. As chair of Community Futures Wild Rose and governance chair for Rural Health Professions Action Plan, she champions rural entrepreneurship and healthcare. She also holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Calgary and pursuing an MBA. A business owner and mother of 5, Amber is committed to fostering economic growth, governance, excellence, and opportunities for rural Alberta. So for the next few minutes, Reeve Link will share some of her experiences and answer your questions, which you can start popping into the Q&A portal at the bottom of your screen. So Reeve Link, thanks for joining us today. Maybe to start, tell us a little bit about yourself and your community.
Thank you, Mike. As you mentioned, I'm the Reeve of Wheatland County. I also serve as the councillor representing Division 2 for Wheatland. So we are a municipality that has similar to a ward system, but we have divisions. Wheatland is a rural municipality east of Calgary with a little less than 9,000 people, but over 1 million acres. So geographically very large, but a low population.
Great. So you've been on, this is your seventh term, correct?
So I was elected in 2017 to council, and then our council elects our Reeve every year. Many rural municipalities elect their mayor or Reeve within council each year, and some are at large and are elected in the general election.
Great. So think back to 2017 when you were making the decision to run. Like, tell us a little bit about why you ran for council.
Yeah, I think my reasons for running for council were really similar to many other people I've spoken to. I had several people approach me and ask me if I had considered running for county council. There was a vacancy in our division because the previous councillor had moved. I didn't have any, screaming issues or singular focus that I had when I decided to run. I did see some challenges with the long-term viability of both our county, but also just rural Alberta in general. And I wanted to make a difference. As you mentioned, I do have 5 children, and I want them to have an incredible future and to have the same opportunities that we have had in our community. So that was really what drove me. I am so grateful for these webinars that you are facilitating, because I think it's really important that people have a clear understanding of what the role is. And I did take that seriously as I made that decision to run, and did a lot of research and investigation on what municipal jurisdiction is, what impact we can have. Every day is a new challenge as a municipal elected official, whether it's dealing with concerns from ratepayers, or whether it's telling your community story to sort of attract investment, or whether it's working on your budget. Every day there's a new challenge.
That's great.
So you mentioned you ran as a councillor, and then council elects the Reeve. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between those, running a campaign and then being elected by your council? And then what's the difference between the level of work for a Reeve versus a council or councillor?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Julia. So my first year on council, I served just as as division councillor, and then it was in my second year on council that I was elected as Reeve. There's certainly an increased level of responsibility for mayors and Reeves across the province. Obviously, those responsibilities include things like chairing meetings, but also being the spokesperson for your municipality. But one key thing to remember is that you don't have any additional power. You're still just one vote amongst a group of equal councillors. And so you really have to be conscientious about using your voice to represent council's direction in council's decisions. So
Right.
there is an increased workload for sure.
Yeah.
And I was glad that you gave sort of some level setting for people for expectation around work. In rural municipalities, it can be a little bit different. A lot of rural councillors do hold other careers or other sort of jobs while they're sitting on a rural municipal council. Some not, some it is full-time work. We have large rural municipalities as well. But for many of our smaller rural municipalities, this is something that you might do part-time or in addition to your regular career. So the time that you commit does vary, and some of it you determine yourself in terms of how much time you're putting into preparing for council meetings and engaging with your residents and sort of other potential work that you can do as a counselor. But there certainly is a foundational commitment to ensure that you are prepared for those meetings and you are doing enough engagement that you're making decisions that reflect your community.
Yeah. And then as a rural counselor or Reeve, sorry, how does how does that affect sort of your personal life with your own balancing your own work life or your family life with the extra duties? Like how have you experienced that so far?
Yeah, certainly balance can be challenging. When you are an elected official, regardless of what level of government you're serving, it can come with challenges. It does impact your family. You certainly want to ensure that you have a thorough discussion with your family, and by family I
Mm.
mean not just your partner or your spouse and your children, but also your parents, and sort of extended family, because this type of work does involve support from your entire family and really the network that you have around you. And so I think it's critical that you do balance. It's important that you use good time management and planning and prioritizing what's important. There does need to be that recognition that sacrifices will be made. Certainly there have been times where I have missed family events because I have made the decision to follow through on a commitment with council and to be there to represent our county. And it can be challenging for your family as well, but I think you just need to really be upfront about that and go into running as a candidate or being elected with eyes wide open.
Mhm.
Great. So we touched on in our presentation, we touched on kind of the benefits of running for council, and one couple of those is like having a seat at the table and helping leave a legacy and build the future of your community. So over your tenure on council, what's been like one of the most rewarding parts of serving on council, and maybe like touch on what you think is one of your council's biggest achievements?
Certainly, thank you. I would say for Wheatland County, we were in a tenuous position in terms of 60% of our total revenue comes from oil and gas. And while I will support oil and gas with my dying breath, and also fight for our agriculture industry, which makes up the vast majority of our land base, um, agriculture makes up a very small portion of our revenue and a small amount of our assessment, but oil and gas is the primary revenue generator in our county and in many rural municipalities across Alberta. Every year, that revenue is decreased a little bit, whether it's through federal or global pressures on the industry. And so it became really apparent that we had some potential viability challenges and that we would need to find ways to diversify our economy and our tax base. And Wheatland County, collectively through council's strategic leadership and vision setting and sort of approval of plans, and through our administration's dedicated work, have had some really significant successes in terms of investment that has committed to building in Wheatland County. You referenced some of it at the beginning of my introduction, and I can say with confidence that we have changed the trajectory of Wheatland County and potentially of rural Alberta. And that has ripple effects outside of the tax base. It goes into employment opportunities that are being created, and those employment opportunities can help give people purpose, which can help mitigate mental health issues and addictions, and help with youth being having opportunities to stay in our community for. So I'm really proud of that work that our council has done and the impacts that that will have in the future.
Great.
with that being said, I'll qualify it. The majority of the work that we do is mundane. It's policy setting
Yeah.
and approving bylaws and really oversight of our administration's work. And so I do hope that people go in with very managed expectations about sort of what the day-to-day looks like.
So
So we have some,
oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
sorry, I was just going to say we have a participant question. So I'd like to toss that over to the Reeve. So what is the most effective way you found to build consensus around a contentious policy issue?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And while I think it's important to strive for consensus, that's not actually always possible on a council. So democracy depends on those diverse perspectives, as Julia and Mike referenced in their presentation. And I truly believe that. And it's critical to have healthy debate and to have those diverse perspectives around council tables. It's great when you can have consensus on a decision, but I think what's key is to really, with respect and an open curiosity, listen to every perspective of your colleagues and to hear those. I've had times where there's been a compelling counter argument made during a council meeting, and it has shifted my position on an issue or on a question. So I think you need to be open-minded, you need to listen, you need to be respectful. And then the really critical piece is when a council decision is made, even if you haven't built consensus, you need to respect that decision and you need to leave that council meeting with the messaging that this is council's decision. You have freedom to say, I didn't necessarily support it for this reason, but you need to, at the end of the day, support that council decision. That is the foundation of how municipal decisions are made. So it's a good question. In terms of trying to get to that consensus, I would say it's listening and really trying to see the perspective of your colleagues and see where they're coming from in their positions.
Great. So we had a question on, we talked about balance of kind of your personal and professional life and how you balance the two roles. We had a question in our last webinar around how do you balance the role with also like your personal life within the community. And so, you know, it's a small community, as you mentioned, probably lots of folks know each other. And if you're out and about at the community in a personal setting at someone's house for dinner, for example, like how do you balance being the Reeve, but also just wanting to be a person as well and not have to always be on?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements to that. I think we do always want to be available to our ratepayers, and I think that's critical. And so if I'm at the grocery store and a ratepayer wants to raise a concern, I'm totally fine with hearing it. I had to kind of smile when you said, you know, they may even engage with you passionately, you know, at your house or in public settings, and that certainly does happen. For the most part, people are incredibly respectful, and the odd time that I have had either a phone call or a resident in person who's been really, really upset about something. First of all, I try and recognize that they're upset because this is really meaningful to them and they need to be heard, and I need to understand what the issue is. I do very clearly set an expectation that that interaction has to be respectful, though. So one technique that I'll use is if I have an angry ratepayer on the phone, I'll say, I really want to hear what you're saying, but I need you to say it respectfully. And if you can, you know, take a deep breath and explain this to me in a respectful way, we can do it now, or we can schedule a time after you've had a little bit of time, and we can discuss it at that point. I think it is important to set boundaries and to not allow people to engage disrespectfully, either with you or with colleagues or in different settings. So yeah, it's a balance there. And then I can't stress enough how important it is just to have that network around you to provide balance in perspectives and support, whether it's other community leaders, leaders from other levels of government, whether it's your family or mentors. Those are critical relationships.
Great. So I have a couple questions in the chat, which we'll get to. So this has to do with kind of the varying backgrounds on council. So as a woman, did you have specific strategies to help overcome stigma of an old boys club. I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah,
Council?
I can't say that I have necessarily experienced any different sort of behavior or expectations because I'm a woman. There can be challenges for people of any gender when you're a parent and you have different responsibilities like that or other career expectations. I know there's challenges when we don't see ourselves represented around a council table to think that you belong there. And I would echo the comments that both you and Julia made earlier in that anybody who's here today belongs around that council table. If you are considering running because you want to make your community better and you're doing it for the right reasons. I think we have come so far in terms of diversity on our councils and respect for different perspectives, whether that's gender or your cultural background or religious background. Um, I, I think we've come a very long ways. I do think it's important to build networks and to support each other. Yeah, I wouldn't say that I experienced really any different treatment because I was a woman.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. I think that's
Yeah.
encouraging for the women listening. So we have some questions around now you're an old hat at this, you've lots of experience. But if you think back to when you were first elected, did you have previous experience working with things like big budgets or any experience running formal meetings like the ones that you do with your council or committee meetings? Can you tell us a bit about that learning curve and some tips for managing meetings or how to handle budgets?
Yeah, I think that, like you referenced, there is really strong training for new counselors. There's good orientation processes that are done through the elected official education program. I was grateful. I did have some governance background. I had sat on a school board from about 2000 to 2007 and had been vice chair at sort of the last couple years of that service. So I did have some experience with governance and with large budgets and some of the um, sort of oversight of administration, those types of things. But even if you don't have that background, know that whatever life experience you have, and that could be from running your own business to really any diverse background that you could bring to this, and that's going to give you valuable insights and valuable skills that collectively with your colleagues around that council table will help you govern well. And I think it's important to keep in mind that you're not drafting those budgets and you're not drafting those bylaws or policies. You have subject matter experts on your administration who are doing that work for you. Your responsibility is to look at those documents and look at those budget decisions through the lens of your community and through the different perspectives of your ratepayers. And there are diverse perspectives. You may have some folks who are, not concerned about increase in taxes and want you to spend more on services. And then you may have other folks who, even a modest increase on their municipal taxes taking money out of their grocery budgets. So it's constantly trying to balance those competing perspectives and competing considerations within your community and make the best decisions. And that's why folks from diverse backgrounds build the strongest councils, because you have people bringing those different perspectives to the table.
Great. We have a question here that's a little bit more tactical in terms of campaigning. And so wondering about campaigning in a rural county. So I'm looking to do the same. What did you find the most effective? Was it signs or door knocking? Was it a strong social media presence? And if so, like what would be your experience on an approximate budget for signage or other marketing or other campaign expenses?
You bet. So my budget would have been less than $1,000, maybe $500 for some signs. And we just had family and friends kind of help assemble those and put them up throughout my division. I did commit a significant amount of time and knocked on almost every door in my division. There was one road that I just ran out of time leading up on sort of the last day before the election, but I spent hours and hours almost every day running up to the election, just meeting people and hearing their stories, hearing what they saw that the county was doing well, that we should continue doing, but also hearing about where there were gaps or issues that they saw that we could improve things. I actually didn't really have a strong platform, if you will, at that time. I really just was engaging with residents to hear what were their issues and did they see solutions to those issues. And then that's really what became my platform. In terms of budgeting, social media wasn't I did have a social media page, but I wouldn't say that that was sort of primary at that time, but that was also almost 8 years ago. I do think you would want to consider some social media, some website presence, but it's really about just getting out into your community and meeting people and hearing their stories and their priorities. If I could offer one piece of advice, it would be not to make promises that you can't keep. And that really hinges on, as you referenced, understanding those jurisdictions between municipal, provincial, and federal government, and understanding the legislative constraints, even within that municipal jurisdiction, of what you can do. And there's financial constraints, there is capacity constraints. So I would say really root yourself in the legislation that you would be operating under as an elected official and some of the primary documents at your county, your land use bylaw and municipal development plan, the existing policy and bylaw framework. Become somewhat familiar with those. It can be daunting at first, but try and immerse yourself in some of those important documents so that you understand some of the constraints to your work.
Great, thank
Excellent.
you.
So, is there an example of something in your time on council that you thought would be easy to change as a counselor, but it turned out to be far more complex? Do you have any examples or any thoughts around that?
Things that always take longer, I think, than I would hope that they would. And some of that is because there are legislative requirements in terms of public engagement or the processes. I do understand that better now, and I do stand by the rationale for a lot of those sort of regulatory requirements. It is critical that we do appropriate public engagement and the public is aware when we're deliberating on a decision. But I think that's probably been the thing that has surprised me the most is just sometimes it can take significantly more time than you would kind of think at first to complete, whether it's a project or an initiative or to pass a specific bylaw regarding a project or that type of thing.
Yeah. That's a good point. And so maybe we can shift now to that advocacy question. So, how important is regional advocacy with other municipalities around you, or joint advocacy or direct advocacy with the province? What's your experience been as a rural counselor?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. So both within your own community, but also regionally, you simply can't offer all of the services that your residents are looking for. So it's important to have that intermunicipal collaboration. And the government of Alberta has been encouraging that and facilitating that through some of their initiatives. But it's also critical to build relationships both with your provincial and federal leaders that represent your community as well. Many of the concerns, and you referenced this earlier, many of the concerns that we hear are more in that primarily provincial jurisdiction. So it's important to have those relationships and then also to work with organizations like RMA, the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, and Alberta municipalities. Um, Collectively, RMA and AM do a lot of joint advocacy on issues that are important to municipalities, but that really hinges on having those strong relationships with our colleagues in government at other levels. So that
Yeah.
advocacy is critical.
And then there was another question that I thought was really interesting was like, as a rural counselor, and now having done this since 2017, how has the landscape shifted for a rural counselor? Are there issues that are more prominent now or changes in the political landscape that you've noticed? What matters in rural municipalities now?
I would say it's a lot of the same key considerations that, we were working on in 2017. I will say the last 5 years, I think, have hurt everybody in different ways, whether you lost somebody, to COVID, or whether your business was impacted due to restrictions, or you lost a loved one due to addictions that were exacerbated by restrictions. Everybody has been hurt in the last 5 years. And we talk a lot about the polarization and the divisiveness. And I think a lot of that comes from that hurt and a lot of the damage that has just occurred. And I don't fault anybody for that. It's been an impossible situation. And it's been really complex. But I try and keep that in mind, is that people have been hurt. And I think what we need more than ever is to focus on all of the possibilities for the future. And everybody on this call today has the opportunity to really have a profound impact on their community. And those, I'm not candy coating it. I really wanted to strike a balance today between sharing the realities of being an elected official, and there are some harsh realities and some real challenges with that. But the opportunity to contribute to your community through your service is really profound. And I think if we can collectively focus on how do we all positively impact our communities, whether it's through public service or whether it's through how we engage with our elected officials or participate on boards and committees, we all have a role to play in that. And so I would just really encourage anybody today who's considering running, don't put your head in the sand, be aware of what some of those realities are, but also be optimistic about the impact that you can have by working together with your colleagues.
That's great. I was going to ask you if you have any last minute piece of advice for candidates, but I kind of wonder if you answer that. But do you, as the final thought, have anything else you want to share with the participants today and prospective candidates?
I guess I'll leave like one pragmatic piece of advice. Maybe consider carrying dog treats in your pocket. Campaigning in rural Alberta, you're going to run into a lot of furry friends. Some of them are more friendly than others. A dog treat's not going to help with the guard bull that I ran into when I was campaigning in 2017. But no, I would just say go into it with an open mind. Really contemplate what your reasons are for running and make sure you're running for the right reason. If you're running on a singular issue, do you really want to commit 4 years of your life doing all this other work not related to that singular issue? So really make sure that your reasons for running are aligned with the work that you're committing to do, and engage with your community. Find out what those priority issues are, and be prepared to, work together with your colleagues and your
Yeah.
administration.